Hello and welcome to Futureproof. I'm Pádraig Floyd, and today I'm joined by Bobby Riddaway, who's a professional trustee and managing director of HS Trustees. He's also the power behind the throne of a new industry body, the Trustee Sustainability Working Group, which seeks to bring together professional trustees, member nominated trustees, and other interested parties to accelerate best practice within investment around sustainability across the pensions industry. And in the early days, it's got a particular focus on climate change. Thanks for joining me today, Bobby, and welcome.
Good to be here.
Thank you. Can you tell me what's behind the motivation to set up this Trustee Sustainability Working Group?
I started looking at environmental, social, and governance aspects while I was still a consultant. And I had what's called my light bulb moment while I was going through the CFA certificate in ESG examination study. Then I tried to do what I could in consulting world for the small schemes, and then I became a professional trustee 2 years ago. And all of a sudden, once I became, everybody wanted to speak to me in ESG and in climate change. And so I started talking to a lot of people who were not even in pensions, who were ESG and climate change experts. And it became very clear that they had a view that pension schemes were behind on ESG and climate change. And I had to re educate them to say that what's happened is pension schemes are being dragged in by disclosure with TCFD, and that's raised the bar. And they weren't experts in it. The modelling wasn't ready. They've come in as a I don't know. They had loads of assets, so the government wanted to bring them in as a lead, and that's really brought everything up. And then it became apparent that there wasn't really a single voice for trustees on climate change and sustainability, as what was happening in the industry is more and more codes, funding code, general code, ESG, sustainability falling down the agenda, while climate change is becoming even more serious and even more short term. And so it became clear then that whilst there were some really good supportive professional trustees out there talking about sustainability, and not just professional trustees, trustees of big schemes and trustees in the AMNT, they were either part of a subgroup, say, of the APPT, which obviously the APPT puts all its pension stuff first, and ESG sustainability becomes a subgroup, or they were on, say, an asset owners network where it's just really large schemes. And really, the small scheme voice wasn't really being heard, and there wasn't any joined up trustee only group. I think it might even have been late last year, and I got talking with Mike Clark, who's one of the drivers behind the actuarial profession's work on climate modelling. And we both agreed that actually we need a strong trustee voice to keep sustainability high in the agenda, to make messages around the elephants in the room out there that people are not making, to ensure that the general trustee groups can carry on with the general pensions codes that we all need to comply with, dashboard. They're all very, very, very important. And really focus the expertise and the knowledge in trustee world to come up with a trustee voice on sustainability and climate change. So similar to what the investment consultants did with the ICSWG 5 or 6 years ago.
What exactly would you like to see? What kind of specific changes would you like to see to the regulatory approach?
So the main thing that we've got to do is get ahead of regulation. So I was already working on a number of initiatives which are out there in the press. The small scheme stewardship exercise that got a big investment manager to change their mind earlier this year, a £7 million scheme. My push to have transition plans replace TCFD for big schemes and implementation statements for small schemes. But quite often groups, even industry groups, what they tend to do is respond to consultations. I've spoken already to the DWP and the TPR to let them know this group's coming, and they are delighted that we're actually seeking to help form consultations and not take part in consultations and get the right minds into the pre-consultation stage when the regulators and the government don't have to change their mind on a big initiative they're driving forward, actually help them form that initiative. The really good thing about this group is it's got the good minds on this in this very small schemes, I mean really small micro schemes, and the great people working on the really big schemes. So we can work from both angles and cover all the pieces. Because quite often what you get when regulation comes out is that the the big firms and the big schemes respond to consultations, and the small schemes respond to consultations, but they have a small voice. And really, the mechanics of how small schemes work and small consultancies work is not actually taken into account. So you want to get that into the discussion before the regulations are put forward. So I worked for years as a consultant in very senior management positions in consultancy, and so I know what strains and stresses consultancies have and why they can't just give away stuff for free. And they try to do the best for the clients, but they're very limited on resource. And so I know how I'll be able to know, not just me, other people on the group who work on really small schemes, know how what will work in small scheme world. And if you look at the schemes, they have to comply with TCFD, and the schemes that don't have to comply with TCFD, and you break up the small and big and medium on that basis, it's around half of the assets on both sides of pension schemes. So significant part of the assets are on the small schemes. And we need to, regulation has got us where we are today. It's got the investment managers with ESG teams. It's got the big schemes looking at climate change seriously. It's got new investment products coming out to help build diversity back, the biodiversity back. It's got all this attention to come because of TCFD. But now the schemes that are spending a lot of time on ESG and sustainability issues, the vast majority of that time is on disclosure. And what we need to do is move it from disclosure to action.
You say in the release that you want to be action oriented. And I mean, is that then bringing the debate rather than many trade groups, which are very passive and sometimes one might argue supine when it comes to consultation, bringing the debate to the consultation in partnership with the regulatory authorities, but also sharing knowledge with the smaller schemes so that everyone gets dragged up at the same time?
Yes, and working with the consultants as well. And we're a trustee group, we can't do all the work. So we are already exploring ways in which we can work potentially with consultants to help regulators on some of their projects. And there's some of them are quite live at the moment as well. But it's not deferring everything to the consultants. There's quite a lot of knowledge in the trustee in the asset owner world that can help here. And we're the people that take the risk as the asset owners. So, and also ESG and sustainability is quite a small pool of people anyway. So if you just take me as an example, and there's other examples in trustee world. I was a significant resource in consultant world, and I've gone across to trustee world. So we need to work together to make this happen. And I've already been in discussions with the ICSWG on various initiatives. As this group forms, those discussions will now come under the umbrella of this group. So the group isn't being formed in a vacuum. It's being formed when initiatives are ongoing. Some initiatives I'm involved with, some initiatives other people on the group are involved with, but we'll all get involved in them. And what we will have is what we need, another big voice in the sustainability arena for pension schemes. With all the other stuff happening, you can't have enough big voices out there for pension schemes banging the drum that we need to find solutions to climate change and we need to direct money where we can.
I know you are skeptical, if not critical, of the current approach to uh, climate scenario modelling, and you've proposed something else, like transition plans, which you've just touched on. Um, are there any other discrepancies in the modelling and scientific stuff that goes on that needs to be highlighted and that you tend to draw attention to within the group?
So why should pension schemes have been the organisations to do detailed climate modelling? The reason was so that the climate modelling showed that there's a big risk. And so then pension schemes think it's an important thing they need to tackle. The climate models that were put out there were not designed for this big existential risk. They were designed, the models were basically asset liability models that consultants had that were there to decide how much equities and how much bonds. They weren't designed to allow for a big external risk like climate change that could destroy value in markets. So I think the sooner the whole pensions industry agrees climate risk is a big issue, and we now need to look for solutions so that the worst things don't happen because we're helping with new solutions, and we help companies who've got to transition, and we put our weight behind that, and then we put pressure on the companies that are lagging behind to transition. Why the pension schemes need to do the modelling to tell them that it's an issue. So my point is, the big risks of climate change are societal risks. Society should be doing the modelling of why it's a big problem. Pension schemes should get the message that climate risk is a problem, and where they then put their money, where they put their effort, they can help solve the problem. I think pension schemes doing detailed climate risk now, other than the schemes that have really got involved in this, and then they're then a part of the knowledge in the industry and the experts in the industry, and who can help external to pension schemes model climate change. They're working with universities who are not pensions experts on climate change, but generally we need all pension trustees to understand that climate risk is a problem, that we can have a say in making it not happen as bad as it could if we don't, by using our stewardship to push companies, and by investing assets in to support the growth of solutions and to support the transition.
What have you identified as what success will look like for your group? Have you got some key milestones you're hoping to achieve?
So that's a really good question, and the simple answer is no. And in fact, what we've done is we've been even more focused on that and said that initially this is a sustainability group. So we are wanting to solve climate change, biodiversity to the extent we can as pension scheme trustees. But actually, we're probably going to focus on climate change in the very short term, because of the fact that there's messages out there which are not necessarily true, because no one's being forceful enough to say this is what the position is. There are still climate deniers out there, both in pensions and in other industries. And the focus has been too much on governance and disclosure, which has got us here. But with the increased governance and disclosure in other areas that's coming at us rapidly, we need to focus our climate change ambitions on actionable stuff that will make a difference. So getting these thousands of small pension schemes, you can't steward 1,000 companies in a tracker, but they can, as a group, get involved in 1, 2, 3 initiatives a year to make the big players start playing ball. Helping the big schemes find the products that we can get money into to fund the transition, to fund biodiversity parks, etc., and get talking to the industry to say, yes, in the past, if you had a new investment product, you need a 5-year track record. Let's in the timescales for climate change, that's too long. These companies need the money now. Climate change in 5 years, a lot of what's going to happen in the next 5 years are going to determine the next 10 to 15 years. We need to get over some of these barriers. We need to do, say, due diligence on funds rather than prove that the fund's done what it meant to do over the last 5 years. And we need to get, if we can, pension scheme money into very early stages of developments where typically pension funds wouldn't take the risk. They wouldn't go into development. They would only go into mature projects, even in the private equity space.
So, can you tell us a bit about who's in this group?
The initial group is all the people you'd recognise as being supporters of climate change in the industry. So people like Tex Harding, Natalie Winterfrost, they're from the big trustee firms. People like Anne Sander, who works mainly on small schemes. Richard Giles, who it's part time for Pensions for Purpose. So again, someone with a sustainability angle. but he has his other schemes he works on as well. And then people like Peter Cameron Brown, who's a trustee of a big scheme, who's very active, wanting to see trustees do the right thing. People like Maggie Rogers, chair of the AMNT, who's going to bring the view from the member-nominated trustee groups. And then Mike Clark isn't a member, but he's a special advisor, so he's a guest. So allowing guests into the rooms. We want it to be trustees, but he's done a lot of the work over the last 2 years on climate change modelling and on climate change issues, and is well connected, so can get us into people like the regulator, the right person to speak to, people in the big in universities, the right people to speak to. So it's about it's about shortening the lines of communication and getting and spreading the network of people that care about sustainability out further.
I mean, who are you looking to attract?
We want it to be inclusive. So professional trustees, member nominated trustees, and trustees from big schemes, but we've got to make sure it can do things. So we've sort of set a limit of about 15 people for the first one, which should allow any of the trustee firms, professional trustees firms out there to become involved. So I did invite all the professional trustee firms at outset, and they didn't all accept straight away. A number of them did. A number of them are waiting to see how this group develops. But if all the professional trustee firms want to be involved, then I think we might have to go up to 20 people initially. But we want to keep it similar to what the Investment Consultant Sustainability Working Group was. Keep it a representative of the major players, so professional trustees, big schemes, and AMNT, but small enough to actually do things. We're not looking to respond to consultations. We're not looking to do things which other groups probably will do. We're looking to make impact in terms of messaging, and first of all, try to get everybody up to the same point to which they can be, and then try to move on some of these initiatives. And the initiatives that I've mentioned earlier have much more traction if it's all trustees asking for these initiatives rather than just one set of trustees or one firm.
Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you. And if anyone does want to discuss the group with me in any way, then if they don't have my email address, then contact me on LinkedIn.
Thanks once again to Bobby for joining me today to tell us about the Trustee Sustainability Working Group. Now that just leaves me to thank you all for watching. If you've got any suggestions, stick them in the comments below. Click whether you liked it or disliked it. I don't mind either way. Just do those usual social media things. And I look forward to seeing you again on another edition of Future Proof. Bye-bye now.